having there be no barrier between my brain and my hands. It's funny, normally when drummers work on technique, they work on getting faster and I still do that. Drums are a very physical instrument, but I've never really done this before. Well, I'll go and play for like 15 minutes just on this loop and just try to be as relaxed as possible and try to find where the tension is. I'm looking at it in aspects that are different than I've really approached before, where before I'm like, how can I get this independence here? How can I do this lick? And now it's just more of a global examination of my playing on how can I make it more fluid? How can I make it more relaxed? And it's funny too, because sometimes it works and then sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I have to catch myself where you're playing and you're in the moment and there's thousands of people out there and you're in a song and I'm like, oh wow, wait, I'm tense here. I have to like slow down. I'm hitting too hard. Because also it's something that's new. It's not totally ingrained, but it's not just a physical thing, it's a mental thing also. And I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and I know you talk about this a lot, but the biggest difference that I've ever noticed in my playing is that if I can somehow get 10, 15 minutes before a show and just sit in a chair and meditate for 10, 15 minutes, the difference in my playing is incredible from before to after. So silencing the mind, relaxed body, it makes for a much better show. Yeah.
So here we are with Mike Greenfield, drummer of Lotus. Mike, so glad to have you here. Can't wait to see you at Summer Dance coming up. How you doing today, Mike?
Everything's awesome. Everything's great. Just spent the day traveling. I'm in beautiful Merrill, Wisconsin right now, waiting to go to a festival tomorrow. So just hanging out. It's great to be on.
Land of the cheese.
Yeah.
So Mike, to start this off, I'd love to talk about, what it's been like playing with Tim. And like, as a band, how do you guys find this balance between having him kind of fit into Lotus sound versus just kind of setting him loose and like letting Tim be Tim and just kind of what that's been like?
Yeah. It was such an incredible process. To go back a little bit, Rempel first told us in the middle of the pandemic that he wanted to leave, So it's just like in the middle of everything going on, I'm just like, oh my God, now we have this. And I wasn't even sure if the band would continue. I was just like, a lot of people view Mike as the lead singer of the band since we don't have a vocalist and he's playing all the main lines. Would people really accept someone new? And I started to get a little down on it. And we started to look at other guitarists and they started sending in demo tapes and they were all awesome. And I'm listening to them and I'm like, wow, this could really work. This could happen. And then we got Tim's, and I listened to it. He recorded himself playing a song we have called Destroyer, which is like a very long, like really slow build, epic guitar solo. And I got the chills listening to it. And I had to turn the lights off and I listened to it again. I called my wife over, come listen to this. And she listened to it. She goes, wow, this is dirty. This is awesome. This could work. I'm like, yeah. And so we brought him down to Philly. He lives in Connecticut. And just threw a lot of songs at him, just had him play. And we didn't even honestly try out anyone else. We just, from then on, we're like, okay, this is the guy, this is going to work. And he really had a lot to do because it's not just learning, our repertoire, which is intimidating enough. I remember when I joined the band 13 years ago, just having this binder of songs that I'm going through, trying to learn everything. So you have that, but then also, keeping true to your own voice, keeping true to what Rempel was doing, trying to fit into guys who've been, playing over 1,000 shows together. So he had to juggle all these parts together. And, where we are now, almost a year after his first show, is where I thought we'd be in like 3 to 4 years, the comfort level of where he's at. How he's been able to take these songs and incorporate them into his own DNA, I guess you could say. It's not just learning a song, it's like becoming the song. And honestly, I couldn't be any happier. It's really great. It's refreshing to have someone playing on his level that wants to be there. And you know, I think he really lit a fire on the you know, under the whole band, and we're doing great. The band sounding awesome. So yeah.
Mm. Taking a look back a little bit, jumping to the side, I'd love to hear, you know, with you, can you take me back to like the original reason that you just fell in love with music and ultimately wanted to like commit your life to this?
Yeah, I mean, it goes way back to when I was a kid. You know, my father was an amateur bass player, and music was always around my house, and always loved it. And when I was about 3, my mom bought me a little toy drum set, and I'd be running around playing it, run away, pots and pans, the whole thing. And then when I was in 4th grade, the school I was in had a very good music program, and we had to pick an instrument. And you know, so I chose drums. One of my neighbors was a really good drummer, and I looked up to him, and so it just became natural, and it was just part of me from a very young age. And it just grew, you know, when all throughout high school, college, I always played with bands, so it was something that I did for fun, for growing, for interacting with other people, my social life. And then when I was in college, you know, I started teaching music, and I was playing shows throughout all my 20s. So then it became my source of income also. You know, so it's just been, talking about DNA, it's just been part of who I am all these years. And here I am now, all this time later, and knocking on wood, and, you know, still doing it. So consider myself very lucky. Yeah.
Talking about like the DNA of the style of music you play. I'd love to jump into like the psychology of what's going on in the mind of the listener. And for instance, with repeating rhythms in trance like music, you know, that's definitely a key aspect of Lotus music. It almost feels like an hour of music can like pass by in the blink of an eye. And you know, I'm curious with you as the one kind of the architect of that, you know, a little bit. What do you feel like the effect music has on our minds to kind of give us like the illusion of time passing in that way, and that like profound musical experience you've probably heard so many times that people have had at a Lotus show?
Yeah, no, it's I mean, there's a lot of layers we can unwrap here. I mean, you were talking about repetitiveness, and that's something that I didn't really catch on to as I got older. I think a lot of younger drummers, you know, they're trying to play as much as they can. If you go on Instagram, it's all these guys just playing really cool licks, and that's awesome. As the drummer in me looks at that, and, you know, I don't play that way, I can't play that way, but I really admire it. But there's something to be said about being minimalistic and repeating yourself, and maybe playing the exact same pattern for 31 bars, and on that 32nd bar just doing something a little different, and then going back to it, and everyone all of a sudden now that's different, and maybe doing, you know, the second cycle of that, bringing it a little bit more and then a little bit more. So gradual changes, as opposed to just playing a million notes, can really stretch time out, especially with improv music. Probably about a third of a Lotus show is improvised. And if you come out swinging and playing a lot of notes, and there's just nowhere to go, you know, so bringing it back, being repetitive, thinking about phrasing, long phrases, where are you going to go from here? Where are you going to be in 5 minutes from here, 10 minutes from here? That really helps to bring it. So you can do these songs that are 15, 20 minutes long. And that's something I've noticed with Tim too. Like Luke actually had to adjust the set list lengths because we're playing longer songs now. So, you know, the first 10 shows we played, we had songs left over, and now we had to adjust for that and cut them back. So, you know, these 2 hours can fly by really quickly. But it does, it change, you know, how can your mind not be changed when you're listening to music at a live show, or even, you know, just at home? It changes you profoundly, I think. So, yeah.
I'm curious from your perspective, and like, you know, being the artist that you are and the genre that you're in, when it comes to improvising, you know, there's moments where it can feel like telepathy almost, where you're gonna maybe even anticipate what your friend was gonna say, and you can say it for them just based on their eyes. Or in like an improv jam, by like, wait, how did I how did I know you were going to do that? Like, what have you come to learn about the way the mind works based on what you do?
Those moments are really special when that happens, when the band links up. And sometimes like I'll physically laugh out loud, I'll play a line and Luke will be playing the exact same line and we'll hit at the same time. And sometimes I don't know, is it just like, are we really communicating? Maybe because I've done over 1,000 shows with him and I know his vocabulary a little bit. And so I can kind of feel where he's going and maybe feed off that. But those moments are really special. And with improv music, you can go there where other times where you can't. And also I'm lucky enough that I played with a lot of groups that improvise and do it in a very different way. I've been playing with the New Deal a lot, and the way they improvise is very different than Lotus. When Electron was doing a lot of shows, playing with the guys from the Biscuits and Tom Hamilton is very different. And it's learning how to fit in with all of these different players, because everyone I'm going to treat differently, especially with the bass player. I'm always, for example, Jesse plays a lot more notes than, let's say, Dan from the New Deal does. And so I'll play less as a response to that, to give room, whereas Dan will just play one note and hold it out for a real long time. And so that gives me a little bit more freedom to play a little bit more, to do a little more percussion. Also, it's a 3-piece versus a 5-piece with Lotus. So all these, there's so many different interactions that can go on, that we're constantly feeding off each other. And as musicians mature and get better and just know each other more, the places that you can take that are infinite. And I think the listeners, especially in the jam scene, are just so awesome that they can respond to that. It's not a lot of, listeners that can go and listen to musicians like creating on the spot and be into it and try to go on that journey with them. It takes almost training as a listener. If you have someone who's never listened to the jam scene and it just comes from pop, and they come to any of the jam band shows, they're gonna be confused and not like it, because it just doesn't really make sense to them until they finally start getting it. So it's a process for the musicians and the audience alike.
Well, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. Just want to let y'all know we've got these hand-dyed, ice-dyed Weird Music podcast tees, and we're also going to be making some sweatshirts. So if you'd like one, let us know. We'd love to get you one. Also want to give a big shout out to the geniuses over at Thrax CBD for sponsoring this show with their amazing products. Got a link in the description. Also, big thank you to our sponsor, J&J Distribution, Ohio's premier CBD and Delta 8 wholesale supplier. Retailers, check out their brands Kush Burst, 3Chi, THC Edibles, and CBD MD. And also want to give a big thank you to our local print shop, Franklinton Press. If you need any custom merch or custom printing, hit them up. They'll take good care of you. We got links in the description. And yeah, much love, y'all. Now back to the show. I'd love for you to explain to me, like, what you've come to learn about rhythm that can cause for, like, healing.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, maybe it dates back to, our ancestors. I mean, human beings have been around for 250,000 years, and since the beginning, I think they've had the drum, and it's become part of our life today, as it was back then, obviously in different ways. But it's something that people can gravitate towards. Listening to music in general, there are a lot of different aspects of that can cause healing. I think, playing a song that someone relates to, that reaches them. You see a kid at the front rail, just his fist up in the air, eyes closed, and we have this connection, and it's healing them in that way. Sometimes the healing can be even almost superficial. Sometimes someone could be working 50, 60 hours a week in a high pressure job, and then they come to a show and they get to let loose, and that's healing also in a very different way. So, I mean, I don't know if drums themselves can do that. I mean, drums as a part of this whole thing that's going on can maybe do it, but yeah, I mean, I'll take it if the drums are at the center of that. Sure.
What would you say, specifically talking about Lotus style of music, what's your favorite aspect of getting to play Lotus's music?
There's a lot. I think Lotus, compared to a lot of other bands, is almost like jack of all trades. Like I feel that, there's some jam bands out there where their songwriting is just okay, but they improv really well, and vice versa. And I think with Lotus, I really like the compositions. I like how the compositions have changed so much over the last 2 decades, where the first song coming out will be like a funk song, and then the next one coming out will be based on modular synthesizers, and somehow, even though they're very different, they all blend together in this one song, in this one set and sound, and that keeps me on my toes. Also, I think just like the repertoire that we have with each other, the fact that there's not a lot of drama with the band. Everybody gets along, everybody's professional. I think that comes out in the music also. There's a lot of bands that are constantly fighting, and you look at all these stories, VH1 behind the music and all this craziness that happens, and Lotus is a pretty mellow band, and we just go, and we're here to have a good time and get things done, so it's all these things combined. I think it's just it makes for a really great experience, on my end, being a part of it. And finally too, the fan base. I mean, a lot of these kids I've been seeing, since I joined the band, and they keep coming to shows, and I'm meeting new people, and old people come back, and I can, you talk about summer dance, I can just walk around summer dance and see all these kids that I've known forever, and everybody's friends. It's a really good, they call themselves Lotus family, and I think it's for a reason. Everybody is on a similar wavelength, that, and it's rare that you can go and take a group of a few thousand people and just talk to any one of them randomly, and know that, like, you probably have things in common with them. You'll probably get along with them, and that's really cool also. So yeah, shout out to the Lotus fans as part of that.
And I think you deserve a little shout out too, for not just standing in between your 4 bodyguards at summer dance.
Yeah. I'm glad we don't need them, especially summer dance. It's such like an open thing, it's a really cool environment there, especially. So
my next question, I'd love to hear you talk about, like, some of the things you admire most about the other guys in Lotus, musically speaking, or beyond music.
Yeah. It's funny, even what I said before about how Lotus is like jack of all trades sort of thing. When looking at Jesse, Jesse isn't just our bass player. He between him and Luke, they're writing all the songs. Jesse is also our business manager. Jesse has a lot of inputs with our lighting. Jesse does the mixing, a lot of the mastering, and the production. So, like, watching him being able to do all of these things and be able to talk about any aspect of the music industry is really incredible. Also, with him and Luke's work ethic is just unbelievable. They're so prolific. We're putting out an album at the end of actually August 23rd, I think, or 6th. And on Monday, I'm going in and recording our next album already. It's already written and already done, so they just keep pumping out songs. It's really amazing to watch that. With Tim, it's just he's a virtuoso. He's a guitar virtuoso. And watching him take all of these songs, putting his spin on it. And even just like, there are a few songs where I'll just go and again, I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe a human being is playing this guitar right now, because it's just like unbelievable. Even like Flower Sermon when we were at Electric Forest, I remember Destroyer when we were at Red Rocks recently, like all these, I'll just go back, even listen to them and listen to his soloing, and it's just amazing. And then Chuck being Chuck. There's only one Chuck Morris in this world. I've never met anyone like him. He's great with percussion because he understands that percussion is the cherry on top of the sundae. It's the icing, and it's not his job is just like to add that little extra flair. And a lot of other percussionists I play with, they get in the way a little bit too much, where he just really understands what to do. And when it's time for him to shine, he can do it, and he could rip also, but having a percussionist with that sensibility is rare. So yeah, you throw all that together, and it's a good group of guys. Yeah.
Mm. And I'd love to hear more about like what you've learned are the key sticking points, the most important things when it comes to being a good bandmate, a good teammate.
Yeah, I think it's really knowing, to have everyone know their place, and for me, knowing what it means to be a good drummer in this band. I think music kind of skews towards two different poles. There's music where the musicianship is featured, and there's music where the songwriting is a feature. And obviously there's a lot of gray area, and trying to figure out where I want to lie on that spectrum of playing. And I really enjoy more being part of this whole piece of songwriting. I never want people to come up to me and say, wow, you're such a great drummer, I was just watching you the whole time. I want people to come up to me and say, wow, the band sounded great. You guys moved me tonight as a band. And that's what I've really come to really strive for as a drummer. Drumming to me is a I'm the backbone. I'm a supporting instrument to let the other parts of the music shine when they need to, and just tie everything together. So and that takes a lot of time and listening. What's really cool with Lotus, we record every show and we put it out on Nugs, which I have an account with now. So I'll go back and listen to, I can listen to any show that we've done since I've been in the band, and really try to examine it. A lot of times when I'm playing in the moment, your head is saying, play this cool fancy drum lick, play more. And every time I listen to it, I'm like, oh my God, I have to play less, So it's funny doing that, going back. And so that's changed how I've played a lot also. And, where I'm at now with it. So, yeah.
So then I'm curious, like with where you're at now, what does growth look like for you, both as a drummer, but just as Mike also?
Yeah. So just, drum wise, I've been focusing a lot on relaxation while I'm playing a lot, because tension is the enemy of being creative. Tension is the enemy of fluidity, of, having there be no barrier between my brain and my hands. So it's funny, normally when drummers work on technique, they work on getting faster and I still do that. Drums are a very physical instrument, but I've never really done this before. Well, I'll go and play for like 15 minutes just on this loop and just try to be as relaxed as possible and try to find where the tension is. I started studying online with this drummer named Dave Eilich, who really focuses on that. And even things like posture, how your posture affects you while you're playing. So I'm looking at it in aspects that are different than I've really approached before, where before I'm like, how can I get this independence here? How can I do this lick? And now it's just more of a global examination of my playing on how can I make it more fluid? How can I make it more relaxed? I can even hear it. And it's funny too, I started working on this and I played a show in the spring with Mark Brownstein, who I played with probably more than any other band outside of Lotus. And he said, wow, your playing's different. What's going on? Your pocket's different. It sounds really good. And I said, yeah, I've been working with this drummer. I've been working on relaxation. He's like, wow. He could tell right away, which was really cool that he could hear it. But I think most people may not even be able to tell a difference, but I can. And I think the overall, the band is will play better for it, hopefully. So yeah, that's where I'm at now, working on that. So
I feel like that also applies to so many things, like letting go and having kind of relaxed muscles, like because it's one thing to want to do it and it's another to actually not have the tension. And what's working for you with that?
Yeah, and it's funny too, because sometimes it works and then sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I have to catch myself where you're playing and you're in the moment, and there's thousands of people out there, and you're in a song, and I'm like, oh wow, wait, I'm tense here. I have to like slow down. I'm hitting too hard. Bring it down. So sometimes maybe because also it's something that's new. It's not totally ingrained, but it's not just a physical thing. It's a mental thing also. And I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and I know you talk about this a lot, but I use meditation sometimes. I consider myself an amateur with it, but it's something I still do. But the biggest difference that I've ever noticed in my playing is that if I can somehow get 10, 15 minutes before a show and just sit in a chair and meditate for 10, 15 minutes, the difference in my playing is incredible from before to after. And I noticed that a lot when we would tour, when we do a lot of shows in a row. Now we're just kind of weekend warriors with our schedule lately. But if I do a lot of shows, every little thing that you do is magnified because it's almost the same every night. And so if I can squeeze that in there, that'll really help with that. So silencing the mind, relaxed body, it makes for a much better show. Yeah. Even, I was talking about, since I've been playing music since I was a kid, when I was in 4th grade, when I had my first concert, it was like Eminem moment where I'm throwing up in the bathroom before because I'm so nervous, and now that doesn't really affect me anymore. I've done it so much, but I think it's still there a little bit. Like I've noticed probably the biggest non-festival show we do every year is Red Rocks. And in 2021, we were lucky enough to play it 4 nights in a row because it was limited capacity still because of COVID. And I think every time we play Red Rocks, Red Rocks is just amazing. It's your entire field of vision is people, it's Red Rocks, the lights, everything. And it's easy to like get not thrown off, but just to like, have the adrenaline going. But then by the 4th night, it's like, all right, yeah, I'm just, here I am again. Here we are, Red Rocks. All right, let's do it. And the band was really able to settle in there, and just like that, man, that 4th night, 3rd and 4th night it was just, we were playing Red Rocks like if we were just like, playing a 500 person venue somewhere, and that's when you play the best, when you don't care. Right. So yeah.
Jumping a little bit to the side, Mike, and this has been awesome. Thanks again, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Coming on here.
Sure.
What would you say has been some of the most impactful lessons you've learned about kind of navigating out of a rut when life can feel kind of gray sometimes?
I think you really have to step back and figure out why it's gray. What I've learned about digging deep into drumming is, and it doesn't have to be drumming, it could be anything, digging deep into anything is once you get into it, it kind of illuminates its relationship onto everything else. So figuring out, okay, why is this happening? Why am I feeling gray about this? What are the deeper levels? Something, it's funny, I can't believe I'm talking about this. Something with me lately, over the pandemic, I gained 20 pounds, right? And last year I'm like, all right, it's time for me to lose this. I have to get this weight off. I can't fit in half my clothes. And I couldn't do it. And like I kept on saying, yeah, I'll do it, I'll get to it. And a year went by, and finally I'm like, why can't I stick to dieting? What's going on in my head? And I had to figure out, because everyone knows how to lose weight, right? I mean, like you just, eat less than you burn and do some exercising, you're going to lose weight. And it's such a simple formula, and everyone has problems with it. So why? So I had to dig into what's going on in my head. Why, where are these blocks at? And I dug into it, and finally now I'm more than halfway there with my goal. So I think just learning to be honest with yourself, to really look at yourself, making goals, figuring things out. To me, it's a way, the only way that you can get from point to A to B in anything, right? So yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What about like creatively speaking, when you're feeling uninspired?
I think doing something that is completely different, but trying to draw influences from it. It could be anything like, going for a walk in the woods, going traveling, going to a different country, watching cool documentaries. It could be anything. I remember I watched a documentary about, it's called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. Have you ever seen that? It's about a Michelin rated sushi restaurant that can only seat like a dozen people, and it's in the Tokyo subway. It's like this little hole in the wall, and this guy who just dedicated himself to making the best sushi possible. And every day, I think it's called Kaizen. It's a Japanese philosophy where every day they just try to get a little bit better. And so I watched this, and there was one guy who was making this egg dish, and he was doing it for 10 years trying to get it. And finally the master came and said, "Yes, that's it, you got it." And the guy started crying, because he finally did this thing, and watching that and saying, okay, just like every day, just get a little better every day, trying to perfect not perfect, but just, take what I'm doing and get a little bit better. If you do that every day, I'm gonna, finally look back and say, oh my God, look what I did in the last 6 months. So being, and getting inspired from, like I was saying, taking walks in nature, being around my kids, reading a book. It can be anywhere. So I think for me, it's stepping outside. You can't just do drums and nothing else, because it'll be boring. And I think you'll see through that. A lot of my favorite musicians are very well-rounded people and very different people. Talking about the Disco Biscuits, there's only one John Gutwillig. I've never met anyone like him in my entire life. And look at the way he plays guitar. Look at his songwriting from the past. There's no one like that. So a lot of these, a lot of people that I really look up to have a lot of different interests, and they get inspiration from that. So I think, I think that's the key. Looking outside your comfort zone and trying to learn from that.
Starting to wrap up here, you mentioned some books. I'd love to hear, like, if any books have been especially impactful for you across your life.
Yeah, there are a few. There's Stephen Pressfield wrote a book called The War of Art, which is a take on the title Art of War. And he's an author, and he just talks about what it's like to be creative and what he calls the muse. And so I read that, and that really affected me. And even with authors, Stephen King wrote a book called On Writing, and just listen, he would take a sentence that was complicated, make it more simple, make it more simple. What's the essence of this? And what we were talking about before with drums too, why do I have to have a 5-stroke roll here? I was listening to a band the other day, and the drummer's doing rolls on a hi-hat every other measure. And like, why is that there? What's the purpose of that? So cut away the fat, learning that from books. There's a book by Kenny Werner called Effortless Mastery. And that's a little bit about what we were talking about before, about trying not to have a barrier between the brain and the body. And, he wrote an entire book about that. A fiction point of view, my favorite is Tom Robbins. And I started reading him when I was a teenager. My drum teacher recommended him to me. And I remember being like 18 years old, and you just read a sentence and you have to put the book down on your chest and just think about what he wrote. And even though none of that is really like an instructional book or about music per se, it's just, again, what I was talking about, just being well-rounded and making you think outside the box, So I think, starting there with those would be really good for anyone looking to check some new material out.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, man, so good to talk to you. Can't wait for
Yeah,
summer
you
dance.
too. Yeah, definitely say hi. That's awesome. You've been there before to summer
Oh
dance?
yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite festivals, So it'll be good. It's a good lineup this year, so I'm psyched.
So I got one final question as we're wrapping up here. I love this question. If there's one lesson, one takeaway, a mantra from your story, everything you've gone through, what you're all about, what would you say that might be?
Wow, a mantra. I guess, can I rip off Shakespeare and say, to thyself be true. I think you really have to look deep inside yourself, know what you're about, know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and just be true to that. So yeah, there you go. I fumbled that a little bit, but that's the essence of it.
Mike Greenfield, everyone. Man, can't wait to see it Summer Dance. Can't wait for that album. Thanks again for coming on, Mike.
Great. Thanks for having me.